Welcome to another installment of the No BS review series, where there will be no filler or BS of any kind, just the information you want to know about this vehicle. Today we'll be looking at the T-10A, a rank 5 battle rating 7.7 heavy tank in the Soviet tech tree from Season 1 of the Battle Pass. If you're familiar with the tech tree T-10M, the T-10A is similar to that vehicle, except incrementally worse in just about every area and at 0.6 BR lower. One advanced feature which the T-10A does still retain from its later counterpart though is a stabilizer. A worse stabilizer, mind you, but a stabilizer nonetheless, something neither of the other Soviet 7.7 heavies possess. It is only a vertical stabilizer and is only effective up to about 14 miles per hour, but if used carefully, it can still grant you a massive advantage in terms of getting your shut off first before your enemy. Looking at frontal protection, the T-10A is incredibly resistant to kinetic projectiles, being frontally nearly immune to almost any sort of APHE round, and highly resistant even to APDS. The only spot where you might be able to kill this thing from the front with APHE is the crease around the base of the gun barrel, which, if this vehicle's gun isn't directly facing you, can be penetrated and will expose the crew to the full blast of your HE filler. Do keep in mind though, this will only work reliably with very large APHE rounds. Perhaps not surprisingly, against chemical rounds, this vehicle's armor profile is far less effective, especially the hull. Given the heavy angling though, it can still be trolly even against Heat FS. Looking at side armor, the T-10A has, rather usefully, a very thick and very heavily angled upper side hull, which is thick enough to resist even full-caliber APHE rounds. In terms of chemical protection, this armor layout won't be nearly as effective, but the suspension and side skirts still can sometimes cause chemical rounds to explode away from the hull. Basically, if you're firing at this thing from the side with APDS or APHE, your best bet is to fire either at the flattest part of the turret you can hit, or the space between the road wheels and the top part of the track. Now we'll take a look at what is probably the most problematic aspect of this vehicle, and that's its firepower. The T-10A is armed with a modernized version of the D-25 122mm cannon, with its top shell, the BR-471D, only having 25mm of additional flat pen, compared to the B version of that shell found on the IS-2 all the way down at 6.3. The problems don't end there though, as the T-10A has an extremely long 15-second aced reload speed and an agonizingly bad 3 degrees of gun depression, which means that you'll pretty much only want to be fighting on level ground. On the bright side, many of the Western tanks you'll be fighting at this BR and above are not very heavily armored, and the massive post-penetration damage of your main gun will ensure very reliable one-hit kills. You also have the stabilizer, of course, which is not especially common for 7.7, which again can also be a huge help. It's also worth mentioning that this vehicle gets 2 50 caliber machine guns, 1 coaxial and 1 roof mounted, which is definitely helpful against aircraft and light vehicles. The T-10A's mobility is overall pretty decent, being only marginally worse than the M48 and M60 medium tanks found around this BR. It does have a pretty poor reverse gear, but overall I can't really complain. In terms of backup vehicles, the T-10A enjoys an extremely fleshed out lineup for its BR, which includes basically any type of vehicle you might want. For your CAS, my recommendation would be either the Tech Tree SU-9 or the Premium SU-11. Both of these vehicles carry a pair of 500-pound bombs, have pretty decent penetration on their autocannons, which makes them useful for killing ground targets, and have quite competitive flight performance, which makes them useful for taking out enemy aircraft as well. Due to its poor gun depression, penetration, and reload speed, the T-10A is very much not a vehicle you want to use to engage in long-range gunnery duels. Instead, the rule of thumb that I operate off of is that you should try to only fight enemies within the range that a drunken Slav could accurately throw an empty vodka bottle. The T-10A makes for a very good close-range brawler due to its massive post-pen damage, its rather trolly armor layout, and the fact that it has a stabilizer will nearly always allow you to get the first shot off if you catch an enemy unaware. Think of it like running a shotgun in an FPS game. If you get caught with your pants down out in the open, you're gonna get screwed, but if you manage to get in behind the enemy team and nobody's paying attention, they're going to have a very bad time. I'd recommend pushing aggressively, nearly to the point of recklessness, up low traffic areas either on the flanks of the map or up its center, and try to get behind the enemy team as fast as possible. This strategy is far from foolproof and demands a lot of luck, but I'll be honest, I didn't really find any other roles in which this vehicle could perform consistently very well. I think something many of you might be wondering is how this thing stacks up against the other two Soviet 7.7 heavies, the IS-6 and the IS-4M. While all of these vehicles share the same top shell and bad gun depression, the T-10A has the fastest reload speed, notably much faster than that of the Tech-Tree IS-4M. Armor is a bit difficult to quantify for these vehicles, so these values reflect the thinnest part of the armor that you can actually hit with a reasonable degree of reliability, so unlike the other two, the T-10A lacks any true frontal weak spots. It is technically slower than the other two, but only very marginally, and does have the highest horsepower to weight ratio. Considering the reload speed plus the fact that it has a stabilizer, I think I can comfortably say that the T-10A is the best 7.7 Russian heavy. While the T-10A is certainly not the most meta vehicle for its BR, it still occupies a useful niche and is also just a lot of fun to play, quite frankly. 90% of your success honestly will just come down to how much or how little the enemy team is paying attention to their sides and rear, which makes the T-10A a very good brain-off sort of vehicle to play. Drunk, half asleep, concussed, it doesn't really matter. If you can get a side shot in, 200 grams of HE is going to do its job one way or another. That being said, there are damn good reasons why the Soviet Union switched away from heavy tanks and towards MBTs, and all of those factors very much hold true in War Thunder. Overall, I give this vehicle a 7 out of 10, and honestly, I'd have given it a 6 if it weren't for the fact that it can be kind of funny to play. That's going to wrap it up for this one, guys. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the playlist in the description for more vehicle reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next one.